All right, great. Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank you for attending today. I'd like to welcome you to Connecting the Dots, a PTSD Early Childhood webinar. I am Kathleen Gibson. I'm the Early Childhood Specialist for PTSD. Today, we're connecting the dots on sibling relationships, ways that parents can help siblings feel more supported, and the sibling support movement. I'd like to welcome Dr. Zach Rossetti. He's an associate professor of special education at Boston University and a friend of mine. And this topic is very near and dear to his heart and mine. And I will let him tell you more and get started.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and Mary Jane, and nice to see everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. I think this is an important topic. I love any opportunity to talk about siblings and sibling support. Primarily because in addition to my role at BU as an associate professor in the special education program, in my former roles as a special education teacher and an inclusion facilitator, I often see myself and describe myself first and foremost as a sibling. I was the oldest of 6 in my family, and one of my brothers, my amazing brother Todd, had a disability and needed supports throughout his day, and I'll introduce him a little more and everyone. I wanted to say a few things up front. You can see our agenda. There will be a short presentation, 20 to 30 minutes. I am a college professor, so I tend to talk a lot, unfortunately. So give me a sign if I'm hitting that mark, please, Kathleen. And then we will open up for questions and answers. So if you have questions, write them down, maybe put them in the chat, but we will get to them. So it'll be quick-ish presentation and then a good Q&A session, okay? The other thing I need to say up front right away is every family is unique. Every sibling experience is unique. I'm going to share a bit about my own family and sibling experience, and I'm going to share about research related to families and sibling experiences, and maybe some kind of other anecdotes and things like that. It's meant to be instructive, to raise issues, to raise concerns and considerations. If you differ a little bit or a lot, and you're starting to feel worried that you haven't done something, or you feel guilty because you did something differently, please don't. Please remember that every family is different, and we can, address some of that in the Q&A, but this is kind of an overview of some of the common, but not, kind of exhaustive experiences and strategies, okay? So here's my family. As I said, I'm the oldest of 6. My parents had 5 of us, and then and then split up and each remarried. And so my youngest sister Mariah is my mom and stepfather's daughter, but we look at the 6 of us. And Todd is a huge Boston sports fan. We're from New Hampshire. I work at BU. We've seen lots of games together. Loves chocolate cake. Huge sweet tooth, and you can see he's sitting there in the middle in the wheelchair, which is often the case in pictures. He's kind of a small guy, so we always joke, we don't know where he put it. He must have a hollow leg or something. And he's very social. Like I do this for a living. I'm comfortable giving presentations and teaching in my college courses or my former teaching in K through 12. But at a social event, I'd kind of be hanging like with a couple of people I already know, and I'm not the most outgoing. He would go to the same social event and like say hi to everyone in his way. Everyone would know him at the end of the event. And as his older brother, I loved it, but I also like got a little upset. I was like, oh, like he's so much cooler than I am. He's so much more outgoing. and what stood out for me is that he, doesn't speak words. He makes sounds. He's very expressive, and he gets his point across. And so that was one of many lessons that he taught me. And as I got older and started doing what I do, part of my sibling experience was, recognizing that not everyone thought of him that way, the way I did, saw him that way. And so that certainly, if you're wondering it, is motivation for me doing what I did. Lots of siblings end up going into similar professions, helping professions, become OTs, speech therapists, teachers, etc. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say there. So why focus on siblings? Sibling relationship is likely to be the longest lasting, hopefully, of all family relationships, first and foremost. And I want to say now too, especially for this group, this population kind of focusing on younger children, younger siblings, that the other main reason is that siblings are inherently the first communication partners, social partners, playmates. And we want that to go smoothly in general in our families. But also, it, have, reap the benefits of lots of interactions and a nice sibling relationship, but also benefits to each sibling as well, siblings with and without the disabilities, and that's a big theme for today's talk, and so that'll be kind of we'll be circling back to that a lot. Early, I was the oldest, so I was 7 years older than my brother Todd. He was the fourth one of us, and I took on, as some siblings do, even when they're closer in age, I took on a lot of caregiving, and there were ups and downs with that. I'm happy to talk about that later. But what I remember the most are kind of the feeling useful. Like I got to know Todd, and we were really tight. We were probably the closest among. I was certainly the closest with him compared to my other siblings. Like, we all get along very well, but I always felt the closest to him. And other than our mom, whenever I think he felt closest to me whenever I walked in the room, similar to our mom. And he didn't do this with our other siblings. He would kind of stand up in his wheelchair and get all excited and wave his arms. And like, there was clearly something there. And I think it came from all of the hours, caregiving, but then also figuring out like what we could do together. What were the fun things we could do together? And it started with our mom. Like, we would go to an amusement park. Canopy Lake Park is an amusement park in New Hampshire that we went to a lot. Hershey Park in Pennsylvania, we went to. And this is, I'm a little bit old. I don't know, this is a while ago. And we would be at a ride, and she would say, we'd start to go on the ride, and she'd say, "You're forgetting Todd." And I, being the oldest firstborn rule follower, I was a huge rule follower. I asked her, what do you mean? How can we get him on the ride? Like, he can't sit up, he can't hold on. And she said, just take him on the ride and hold tight. And we did. And her attitude was, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. And that doesn't always apply effectively, maybe, or comfortably in every situation, but that's kind of her approach. And so we figured out things to do. And I would go in the pool with him. I'd go to the beach with him, or at the beach, go in the ocean, and, do all of these different things. In addition to some more kind of teaching or mentoring things that might come up later. Real quick, for older siblings and maybe thinking, in the future, which I'm sure many of you are have probably thought about, and it can feel overwhelming. People with disabilities are living longer. Many live at home, especially those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, until parents can't provide care. And it might be a concern that you already have or are wondering about, especially with decreasing funding options. And siblings can play a role and are being called on in terms of some type of caregiving or organizing supports type of roles. And many of us feel comfortable with this. We don't mind. Some might move away and, who knows how it plays out, but many of us are interested in this, but we're often not prepared. And so I think starting at a young age, being involved and learning about family advocacy and, being connected to PTSI and having programming when it's appropriate to involve siblings, the whole family, not just parents and caregivers, because siblings can and do become the next generation of caregivers. One of the key things about growing up and being a sibling is that it does come with unique challenges, but also unique opportunities. And I think this can play out differently depending on some of the factors that I'll cover in a minute. But some of the challenges might be, maybe a sense of embarrassment or guilt, maybe a sense of loneliness or loss related to what you might imagine a sibling relationship might be like. Maybe resentment if there's not as much time with parents. Increased responsibilities. I definitely had as the oldest and was tough at times, but like I said, overall there was an amazing silver lining I'd never trade ever. We might be perfectionists. I've been known to be called that, and kind of parentification. Maybe fulfilling that hierarchical role rather than just being a sibling. And it can be awkward or hard or worthy of discussion sometimes if it's maybe a younger sibling without a disability and they hit that age where they're doing more than their older sibling with a disability. Maybe getting a license later in life and my brother or sister didn't, and that type of thing. But there are many opportunities as well, and lots of them relate to kind of, increased or improved maturity, social skills, sense of advocacy and diversity and things like that. And I've always thought I did feel alone at times. None of my other friends had brothers or sisters with disabilities until I got older and met more siblings and kind of became aware of the sibling movement. That was hard at times. The guilt is something that many siblings feel. So these and it ebbs and flows and comes and goes. So it's not one or the other. There are often conflicting feelings. But certainly not just negative. I want to touch base on some of the research quickly, because a lot of the research through, certainly the 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe into the 90s, and I still see some of it sometimes, assumes that siblings, assumes that more of the challenges, kind of a deficit approach to disability, assumes the challenges and that siblings aren't going to adjust well and might have problems in life. And that is certainly now in the research not the case. A lot of that early pessimistic view that was based on deficit understandings has certainly shifted to focus on the opportunities. And generally speaking, relationships between siblings with and without disabilities are characterized as positive and with frequent contact. Siblings in most of the recent studies have good health and low depression and report lots of rewards. In general, figure out what they need to figure out and cope well and lean into the opportunities and some of those positives, as I've shared some examples. And all the way through adulthood, these findings kind of hold. So a lot of that research, and if anyone's concerned about that, I think, there are certainly, different dynamics that play out in every family, but generally the research is very positive, pointing to certain issues to, figure out in some situations. Factors that impact the sibling experience. Wanted to highlight a few. First of all, the sibling experience can be influenced by many factors, not just these, but these tend to be some of the critical ones. Parents who are able and caregivers who are able to acknowledge the unique role and responsibility of being a sibling, and who can appreciate the complexities of having a brother or sister with a disability can better assist a sibling in learning about and embracing that role. In general, the more accepting parents and caregivers are of the child with a disability, and the more positive and I think informative parents are related to the disability, the more likely siblings will follow their lead and be accepting themselves. If there's any, again, we all have our moments, but if there are patterns of being upset or kind of in denial in some ways related to disability, siblings are certainly going to pick up on that. We're there. We know that our brother or sister is different, or that they have a specific disability. My brother, as you saw, used a wheelchair. I mentioned he didn't speak. As I got older and started doing what I do, I kind of figured he had cerebral palsy, but I never really knew for sure. I'm kind of embarrassed to say. And it wasn't until I was in grad school, after teaching for a number of years, that I started looking things up. I talked to my mom, and he actually was born without a disability, and due to having a seizure related to hydrocephalus, he kind of acquired CP in his first year of life, and I learned all those things much later. It's generally, I think, in the sibling world and related to people with disabilities and their own self-determination and self-advocacy, I think it's generally promoted now to talk about disability and disclose and help people learn, about their strengths and about their needs so they can advocate. And that would hold true for siblings as well. Certainly age appropriate, depending when you're having those conversations. The type of disability and the support needs, play a role: cognitive versus physical, visible versus invisible, communication, possible behaviors, things like that, can result in varied sibling experiences. Family characteristics relate to the size, birth order, age gaps, gender, and a lot of the research, especially related to adult caregiving, it's more common for women, lone siblings, siblings who are in close relationships with their brothers or sisters with disabilities, etc. So those are some factors that can affect the sibling experience. And then family culture, race, ethnicity, of course, but then also broader beyond that, family values, perspectives on independence, interdependence, expectations about caregiving or communication styles, or the nature and involvement of family as siblings get older and become adults themselves. So knowing some of those factors and that kind of overview, I wanted to shift and get a little specific and focus. Again, these maybe implemented differently in each family, individualized for each family, but some broad ways that parents can help young siblings. I think that encouraging siblings to have their own lives and experiences is important and helpful at all ages. Acknowledging the complexity of their family lives and maybe conflicting emotions. And again, even with young children, it's okay to get upset, or I can see that you're crying. Can you tell me how you're feeling? And sometimes we get upset, you know, when you know, with when you can't have time with me, or sometimes you get upset when your brother yells at you or takes your toy. Remember what we you know, what we said, he doesn't mean it, like, you know, whatever explanations like that are happening, which we can talk more in detail about, our things, you know, to kind of refer to and build on and recognize that there are a range of emotions. And I think the message here is that it's all part of it. It's all okay. I think as siblings, any of those negative situations, thinking about them as learning, as parents and caregivers, thinking about them as learning experiences, is really important, related to the sibling role, and can kind of foster more awareness of it. Siblings of all ages, if we want to help, we know our brother or sister has a disability. We might get mad or upset for any variety of reasons sometimes. And then if we feel bad on top of getting upset, like we already probably feel bad and feel that guilt from the other slide. And so I think if one way to reframe it as parents and caregivers is as learning experiences. One of the, you can see a lot of these strategies. I think one of the common themes that is not listed on here that is really helpful and that encapsulates a lot of these is to figure out, especially if your time is devoted a lot more to the child with a disability, to figure out a special time with your other child or each of your other children. And if you have a big family like we did, that can get hard. So even if it's once a week, every couple of weeks, once a month, what's a special time for just me and my mom or my dad or both? Maybe not both if they're, you know, but one of them. And a lot of these things, you know, discussing the disability, working through some of the emotions, like, can happen during that time. And the other thing is, like, they'll usually happen indirectly. You know, kids of all ages might clam up and not know how to answer, or not have the words, or feel awkward if you ask them directly, well, what do you think of your brother? What do you think of your brother's disability? Why did this happen today? But if you're doing your regular activity, going for a walk, you know, watching a show, or doing something that you like to do together, those things usually happen. And if your kids are anything like my daughter, I have a daughter who's 10, she's an only child. A lot of times that comes out at bedtime. You're just trying to get them to bed, and then all of a sudden, in addition to being hungry and thirsty, she has a million questions and a million comments. So if you put out there, you're open, let's talk about this, here's some information, here's our time, it's going to come out probably at bedtime or those random times. And as much as you can, I know it's hard at times, like, trying to take advantage of that is useful. For those of you who have IFSPs, individualized family support plans, you're still there in EI. If you can involve siblings, I would urge you to do so. Can they be communication partners during speech therapy, partners during play activities, motivators or helpers during OT? Just kind of be there, see what it's all about. Might be something to incorporate. As they get older, figure out the best times and the ways that they can be involved. Maybe it's at meals, maybe it's at playtime. Maybe they can play while you're, getting dinner ready, or follow their lead. What do they already seem to like to do, and build from that. And if there's not anything, figure out a time. And like anything, when we're teaching a skill, maybe it's a little more structured at first, and you're teaching each of them skills, and maybe even kind of scripting out how they might ask each other to play, or how they might share something, or if there's a conflict, how they can resolve it, step in so it's prolonged, if you're able to kind of monitor that. A lot of it is similar to the way that we teach skills and encourage students with and without disabilities to interact in the classroom. So those are, and I'm happy to go into more details as well with some of those ideas. Siblings of all ages play a number of roles, and young siblings in particular, might be a friend, a role model or mentor, teacher, and just sibling. Some of these other roles are some of the adult roles that adult siblings might take on, and which is here for your reference. I'm going to skip past this, I think, in the nature of time, but I think it's useful to kind of think about some of the adult sibling roles or situations as well, in terms of encouraging and figuring out and facilitating appropriate and healthy and fun sibling relationships when they're younger. Because I think sibling caregiving, like I said, most siblings are interested in helping and figure out how to do it, and don't mind, all right, I can't move out of state, or I can for a couple years, but then I'll come back. Like, it's not awful. Some siblings who really want to do something in life might move away, that type of thing. I remember wanting to be involved more with my brother as we got older, and my mom was very careful. She said, "You're the sibling, you're not the parent. Like, you live your life and do that." And we were starting to struggle to have some of these conversations, but she was worried about this. She was worried I would be kind of the typical adult sibling, kind of like this club sandwich, worried about it and supporting aging parents, my own children, and with my family, and then also worrying about my brother Todd. And it can be a lot, but most siblings have support and figure it out as well. So I'll skip past this side, and I think end on this final slide from the sibling perspective a little bit, and then point out some resources, and we can get to our Q&A. What do siblings want you as parents and caregivers to know? I think, acknowledging our concerns, acknowledging how we feel, and sometimes the conflicting emotions, rather than being judged. And we can certainly learn new skills and learn to be more positive sometimes too, with that acknowledgement and that framing as a learning opportunity. I love the second one. Typical sibling behavior includes typical sibling conflict. This is a good thing. Not all the time, but I think as as a core social partner, especially at young ages, natural consequences are good for all of us. And sometimes teachers, parents, worry a little bit about natural consequences for individuals, for kids with disabilities. They can be a good thing. And if as a sibling I got annoyed with my brother, that happens, and has benefits. Um, I think asking siblings or just kind of having an open conversation around ways of being involved. Siblings want to be included in those conversations and have options of being involved or maybe being involved in more ways. Um, you know, want and need support, want and need good communication. I think related to some of the research and traditional gender roles and around caregiving, I think it's important, you know, to include both sons and daughters in sibling responsibilities. I was the oldest, sometimes the oldest, whether, you know, it's might be a son like I was. Um, I would say spread it around to other siblings as well if you have more than two. I did feel like there was a lot of burden on me at times. Um, and my siblings deferred to me. Oh, he always feeds Todd, or he always gets him dressed, or he always does this. I was like, I don't always want to do this. I have other things I'd like to do. um, I mentioned including siblings and family supports when possible. I mentioned having some kind of special alone time with parents, you know, not always as a family. I should say, if that's possible, if and when that's possible. Um, and let's see. I think helping, you know, if your kids are not finding interacting well or finding that fun thing to do together, figuring out as a family what is their thing, and maybe it's different for each child with their brother or sister with a disability. But I would encourage. I think that's. I mean, it's kind of a funny way to say it, but I think I was writing some notes, and I think it's important. What is their thing? Like I had a lot of things with Todd, but each of my siblings had their own thing with him as well that they liked to do together, and they figured out, you know, little jokes, and you know they had their kind of routines that they would do together. And so I think that siblings and parents can learn together. And you know, a lot of you are here. You're invested in learning. I assume invested in advocating, and siblings become strong advocates as well. And so one important outcome in all of this is, you know, as a family unit, including even young siblings, being inclusive and becoming strong advocates, because, you know, we all know it still isn't where we want to see it in general in our schools and communities. And so we have you know, strength in numbers and strength in numbers of families when we include siblings in a lot of this work. Um, I'm going to ask, I think I'm going to end by pointing out a few resources. I'm not sure. So one of them is the Sibling Leadership Network. That's a national organization. They have lots of resources. They also have state chapters. And at one point, Virginia is for Sibs was the state chapter of SLN. I don't know if it's still active. It may not be active. If anyone, I know we're all busy. I can imagine how busy you are. But if anyone is interested, it's very easy. I'm part of the Sibling Leadership Network and also our Massachusetts chapter, which is at the bottom of this screen. And it's really easy to get that going again. But you can reach out to the national group or to me directly. There are lots of resources. The Sibling Support Project is another national resource that has lots of books and resources for sibs of all ages. And they have sibling groups that kind of start a little later. I think sib shops are the focus for siblings your children's age. And then when you hit teenager and older, there are these online communities and resources that are useful. Of these books, I would recommend Views from Our Shoes, that has a range of sibling stories and experiences from some young siblings as well. The other two are geared a little more towards adulthood. So Views from Our Shoes is a nice resource. And then there are some online sibling resources. And I want to point out the bottom two. Even though they both focus on autism, I think they'd be applicable to some broadly to other experiences as well. And one is the sibling experience. It has a couple of activities that you can do, have your children do if it might help. And one of them is, what's it called? It's basically a Venn diagram. It's called We're Different in the Same. Things that they're good at or like to do, things that their brother or sister is good at and likes to do. And then the middle of it, of the Venn diagram, is things they both are good at and like to do. And if you're looking for their thing, that's kind of a nice activity. And then the sibling resource packet is from the autism program here at Boston Medical Center, which is affiliated with BU. And they also have the cool thing about this resource, in addition to some of the general information, they focus on ways that siblings, and they have examples for age 6 and then a teenager can introduce their sibling to others and maybe describe, that they have autism in this case, they think differently, sometimes they might do this. And it's really a nice resource for siblings. I didn't have a lot of that language when I was a kid. If people stared at my brother or, sometimes they would mock him because his arms with his CP would wave, I would just kind of like yell at them. I didn't have any useful language to have a discussion or react a little more appropriately, although yelling at them was necessary at times too. So thank you very much. That'll do it for our presentation. Here's my contact info. I'm happy to talk to anyone anytime. Email is probably the best way to reach me. And then I think we'll open up the rest of our session now to the Q&A.